एक सीपी बना देना खुद का कर मिट्टी वाला जो भी है मिट्टी वाला है।
Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to everyone for the Sunday Satsang. May I now request Narayanji at Ramana Kendra Delhi's shrine to initiate the puja, followed by Updesh Saram. Narayanji.
ओम अच्युताय नमः, ओम अनंताय नमः, ओम गोविंदाय नमः। शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्याये सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। अयमूर्तः समुत्सर्गोऽस्तु बन्धो कृणन्दो अयमूर्तः समुत्सर्गोऽस्तु तदेव लग्नं सदिनं तदेव ताराबलं चन्द्रबलं तदेव विद्याबलं देवबलं तदेव लक्ष्मीपते ते तैप्रीतं स्मरामि। ओम भू ओम भुव ओम सुव ओम मह ओम जन ओम तव ओम सत्यम ओम तत्सर्ववरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ओम आव ज्योतिर्समृतं पूर्वोत्तरम् अमोपात समस्त दुर्दशा द्वारा श्री परमेश्वर प्रीत्यर्थम करिष्यमाणस्य कर्मणः निर्विघ्नं माधव विघ्नेशं पूजां करिष्ये। विद्यां तुलसी सुतलं चंद्रगुरु देवता विद्या तुला लोकादेवतं विष्णुनाथुला त्वं सतारे मां देवी पवित्रं गुरुदासनम् आगमार्थं तु देवानां कमनार्थं तु रक्षासं कंडारवंकरं यादव देववानलांजनम्। अमोपात समस्त दुर्दशा द्वारा श्री परमेश्वर प्रीत्यर्थम निर्विघ्न सिद्ध्यर्थम माधव विघ्नेश्वर पूजां करिष्ये। गणपतिं वमामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पते आदिसूनुसादनम् अस्मिन् परिक्रामन्ते महागणपतिं ध्यायामि महागणपतिम् आवाहयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः समं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः अर्घ्यं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः पाद्यं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः आचमनीयं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः औपचारिकस्नानं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः आचमनीयं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः वस्त्रदानं अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः यज्ञोपवीतार्थम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः गन्धां धारयामि समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः गन्धोपरि अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः अलंकरणार्थम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः पवित्राकुङ्कुमं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः पुष्पैः पूजयामि। ओम सुमुखाय नमः ओम एकदन्ताय नमः ओम कपिलाय नमः ओम गजगणकाय नमः ओम लंबोदराय नमः ओम विघ्नाय नमः ओम विघ्नराजाय नमः ओम विनायकाय नमः ओम धूमकेतवे नमः ओम गणाध्यक्षाय नमः ओम बालचंद्राय नमः ओम गजाननाय नमः ओम मकरविंदाय नमः ओम शूर्पकर्णाय नमः ओम हेरंबाय नमः। ओम स्कंदमूर्धवाय नमः। ओम सिद्ध विनायकरे नमः। ओम शंकर मोक्ष विनायकरे नमः। ओम आप्तिपुरपर विनायकरे नमः। ओम महागणपतिये नमः। नानाविध परमण पत्र पुष्पाणि समर्पयामि। धूपार्थं समर्पयामि। धूपार्थं समर्पयामि। अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। देवसवितप्रसव सत्यं दर्देन प्रसञ्जामि। अमृतोऽस्तं स्वाहा। ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा। ओम अपानाय स्वाहा। ओम ज्ञानाय स्वाहा। ओम उदानाय स्वाहा। ओम समानाय स्वाहा। ओम ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। कोडगंड इनिप्पु तेंगाय वेल्लम नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि। मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि। अमृतोपचारोत्तरावसं समर्पयामि। कर्पूरं समर्पयामि। गणपतिं नमामहे। राजं समर्पयामि। नीराजनं समर्पयामि। नीराजनानन्तरम् आस्मनीयं समर्पयामि। हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। गणपति प्रसादं शिरसा प्रणमामि। ओम ओम भुवः ओम सुवः ओम महः ओम प्रणव ओम तपः ओम सत्यम ओम तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ओम ज्योतिषां ब्रह्मपुत्रान् नमो पार्थ समस्त दुर्दशा द्वारा श्री परमेश्वर प्रीत्यर्थम शुभे शोभने मूर्ते आद्य ब्रह्मण द्वितीय प्राप्ते विवेदे पराह कल्पे वैवस्वत मन्वन्तरे अष्टाविंशतितमे कलियुगे दवे पादे जम्बूद्वीपे भारतवर्षे वर्धखण्डे मेरो दक्षिणे पार्श्वे सगाप्ते अस्मिन् वर्तमाने यावादिके प्रभुवादिनां एकादशीजं संवत्सराणां मध्ये विलवनाम संवत्सरे दक्षिणायने शरद ऋतु तुला मासे शुक्लपक्षे एकादशीजां शुभतिथौ भानुवासरयुक्तायां पूर्व प्रोष्ठापदा नक्षत्र युक्तायां शुभ नक्षत्र शुभ योग शुभ करण एवं गुण विशेषण विशिष्टायां अस्यां एकादशीयां शुभतिथौ मम जन्म पाप जन्म पत्रदि एतच्चन पर्यन्तं मध्ये संभाविधानं सर्वेषां भावानां सत्य अवरोधनार्थम् अस्माहं सह कुर्माणं क्षेम सौन्दर्य वीर्य विद्य आयुरारोग्य ऐश्वर्येण अभिवृद्धं समस्त मंगलाभ्यर्थम समस्त दुर्योगशांतयार्थम रमण महर्षि प्रसादेन ज्ञानवैराग्य सिद्धत्वं श्री रमण महर्षि पूजां करिष्ये रंगं कलश पूजां च करिष्ये। विघ्नेश्वरं यथास्थानं प्रतिष्ठापयामि ओमनाथि शेषाय रागमनाय च। कलशस्य मुखे विष्णुखण्डे रुद्रसमाधिर्थ मूले सप्तसिद्धो ब्रह्मा मातुले समृता कुशौ तु सागरा सर्वे सप्तचूडावसुन्दरः ऋग्वेदो यजुर्वेदो सामवेदोपधर्मण गंगे से सैन्य सैन्य गोदावरी सरस्वती नर्मदे सिंधु कावेरी तीरे संगमितं कुरु अंगैः सहिता सर्वे कलशापु समाचिता आयान्तु देव पूजार्थं दुर्दशकारणाः। अंबुरा सागर उत्पन्नो विष्णुना विष्णु करे देवे सद्गुरुते सर्वे पाप्यन्य नमोस्तुते देवो देवालय प्रोक्तो जीवो देवस्नान ज्ञान निर्माल्य सोयामं मे तुझे ओम सकल गुणात्म शक्ति युक्ताय योग पीडात्मने नमः आधार शक्तिये नमः मूल प्रकृतिये नमः आदिवराय नमः आदिपूर्वाय नमः आनंदाय नमः पृथ्वी नमः आदित्यादि नवग्रह देवताभ्यो नमः दशदिग्बालेभ्यो नमः गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरु विष्णु गुरुदेवो महेश्वरा गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ओम अस्य श्री प्राणप्रतिष्ठा मंत्रस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वरा ऋषिरेति सामदर्वाणि सद्धांसि सकल जगत सृष्टि समार्गाणि प्राणशक्ति परा देवता आम बीजम हरिभक्ति ओम कीलकम प्राणप्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आम दुष्टाभ्यां नमः हरिंद्रनित्यां नमः ओम मध्यमाभ्यां नमः आम नाभिभ्यां नमः ओम कर्कटपुष्टाभ्यां नमः आम हृदयाय नमः हरिं सरसे स्वाहा ओम शिगाय वषट् आम कौसायम हरिं नेत्रदाय वषट् ओम हस्तदाय भट गुरुवस्वरूपि दिग्बंध ध्यानम रक्तांबोधिस्तबोधोरसतरणसडकराब्जे वासंबोधंडमिक्षुत्व मणिगुणपञ्चमाणाहत विप्राणसुकवालञ्चनेन सदा पिनवसोरोज्या देवी बाला गौर्णा बहुदूरी प्राणशक्तिपरान ओम आमरीं क्रों क्रों मरीं मां अम्यं लं लं वंशं सम्मः अंतसों सों वंश अस्यामूर्तौ जीवतिष्ठतु अस्यामूर्तौ सर्वेन्द्रियाणि वाङ्मनस्पस्तस्सोत्र दिव्याक्राणवाक् पाणिपाद आयुपुष्पाणि याकस्ति स्वस्ति सुखं चिरं दृष्टन्तु स्वाहा। ओम अस्य श्री प्राणप्रतिष्ठा मंत्रस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वरा ऋषिरिक्ति सामधर्माणि संधांसि सकल जगत् सृष्टि सम्मार्गाणि प्राणशक्ति परा देवता आम बीजं वरिं शक्ति ओम कीलकं प्राणप्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आम अंगुष्ठाभ्यां नमः हरिनित्यां नमः ओम मध्यमाभ्यां नमः आम नाभिभ्यां नमः ओम कर्कटपुष्टाभ्यां नमः आम हृदयाय नमः हरिं सरसे स्वाहा ओम शिवाय वसत् आम कौसाय हरिं नेत्रदाय वषट् ओम अस्त्रदाय पट्पुरुषं दिग्बन्ध असुनेदे पुनरस्मात् सक्ष पुनः प्राणमे नियुधे भोगम लोकस्य में सूर्य मुच्चन्द्रमरुदे मलयान सुक्ति आवायुधो भव सत्ताभिधो भव सन्निधो भव सन्निधो भव अवगुणितो भव सुब्रतो भव सुप्रसन्नो भव सुभगो भव वरदो भव प्रसिद्ध प्रसिद्ध स्वामी सर्वजगन्नाथ यावत् पूजावसानकं तावत् ध्रुव प्रतिभावेन विघ्नेस्मिन् सन्निधं गुरु। ओम नमो भगवते श्री कुशेलाय नमो नमो भगवते श्री कुबेराय नमः ओम नमो भगवते श्री कुशेलाय नमो नमो भगवते श्री कुबेराय नमः ओम नमो भगवते श्री कुशेलाय नमो कुबेराय नमः चतुर्नोद मंत्रमेन पौरुषपाल ईश्वरा चतुर्नोद मंत्रमेन पौरुषपाल ईश्वरा चतुर्नोद मंत्रमेन पौरुषपाल लक्ष्मी प्रसन्नाय ये है ईश्वरा। I will recite Ramanostotra now. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Abhara Satchi Sugubari, Yashorya Shormi Matram Bhuvanam Samastam, Gurayidam Tam Ramanam Prabhidam, Davinam Siddhisidhayami. Om Mahashaya Mahashaya Jataaya Namaha. ओम श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम गुरवे नमः। ओम अखंड संविदाकराय नमः। ओम अभुजसे नमः। ओम कारणोद्भवाय नमः। ओम जगद्विदावताराय नमः। ओम श्री भूमिनाथास्तलोचिताय नमः। ओम पराशर कुलोतंसाय नमः। ओम सुंदरातर्वफलाय नमः। ओम कमनीय सुचारित्राय नमः। ओम शयायाम्बा शयायवते नमः। ओम शोणाकुल मौलिन मानसाय नमः। ओम स्वर्णस्तगाय नमः। ओम श्रीमद्वादशांत महास्तरे लप्त विद्योर्याय नमः। ओम महाशक्तिनिवादेन प्रवृत्ताय नमः। ओम परमात्मने नमः। ओम दिव्याय नमः। ओम पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः। ओम पितृमोरणा पितृमदे नमः। पितृदेष्ट सोणसैनं प्राप्ताय नमः। ओम तपोमयाय नमः। ओम उदासीनाय नमः। ओम महायोगिने नमः। ओम महोत्साहाय नमः। ओम कुशाग्रदिये नमः। ओम शांत संकल्प संभ्रमाय नमः। ओम सुसुंदरसे नमः। ओम सवित्रे नमः। ओम स्थिराय नमः। ओम तपस्वीर सर्वांगाय नमः। ओम उल्लामूज विलोचनाय नमः। ओम चंद्रिका सदास श्री मंडितांजन मंडलाय नमः। ओम सूदवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः। ओम सूर्यात्र विक्रमाय नमः। ओम वेद वेदांत तत्त्वज्ञाय नमः। ओम चिन्मुत्रणे नमः। ओम त्रिगुणात्माय नमः। ओम विरूपाक्ष भुवावासाय नमः। ओम विराजित सलादिये नमः। ओम उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमः। ओम पूर्णाय नमः। ओम रसिकासन तांडवाय नमः। ओम गंभीराय नमः। ओम परमाचार्याय नमः। ओम सुप्रसन्नाय नमः। ओम अभयप्रदाय नमः। ओम दक्षिणासीवाय नमः। ओम धीराय नमः। ओम दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ओम स्वराजे नमः। ओम महर्षिये नमः। ओम भगवते नमः। ओम ईड्याय नमः। ओम भूम विद्या विशारदाय नमः। ओम विमलाय नमः। ओम दीर्घदर्शने नमः। ओम आप्ताय नमः। ओम ऋजमार्ग प्रदर्शकाय नमः। ओम समत्रुते नमः। ओम सत्यत्रुते नमः। ओम सत्याय नमः। ओम प्रसादाय नमः। ओम अमित विक्रमाय नमः। ओम सुकुमाराय नमः। ओम सदानंदाय नमः। ओम मृदुवासिने नमः। ओम दयार्णवाय नमः। ओम श्री सोनासुर इरुम्बूद स्कंदासुर निकेतनाय नमः। ओम सद्दर्शनोपदेष्टरे नमः। ओम सद्भक्त वृंद परिपूताय नमः। ओम गणेश मुनिप्रियेन सेवितां कुशलोरुवाय नमः। ओम तीर्थोपदेश साराधि ग्रंथ संसूत्र संशयाय नमः। ओम वर्णाश्रम मदादिदाय नमः। ओम रसज्ञाय नमः। ओम सौव्याय नमः। ओम आत्मवदे नमः। ओम सर्वावधि मदस्नानां आराध्याय नमः। ओम सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः। ओम आत्मारामाय नमः। ओम महाभागाय नमः। ओम मातृमुक्ति विदायकाय नमः। ओम विनदाय नमः। ओम विनुदाय नमः। ओम विप्राय नमः। ओम मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ओम भावगोद्बलाय नमः। ओम दर्शनादक सम्मानिने नमः। ओम मौनेन स्वात्म बोधकाय नमः। ओम दृक्षाभिकरसादित्याय नमः। ओम स्नानाद्बंध मोचकाय नमः। ओम मंदस्मिर गंधांशवे नमः। ओम संसारार्थ तारकाय नमः। ओम सोणादिश्वरे नमः। ओम आर्त विद्या प्रकाशकाय नमः। ओम अविच्युत निज प्रज्ञाय नमः। ओम नैसर्गिक महातपसे नमः। ओम कमंडलुधराय नमः। ओम शुभ्रगौरीन वसनाय नमः। ओम गुहाय नमः। ओम दंडवाणे नमः। ओम कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ओम पवलोक विषत्पराय नमः। ओम स्कंदाय नमः। ओम देवतमाय नमः। ओम अमृतयाय नमः। ओम सेनानिये नमः। ओम पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री रघुनाथ श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री रघुनाथ श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री रघुनाथ श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री कार्तिकाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री दुर्गाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री वल्ली देवालये नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री सुब्रह्मण्याय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री स्वामीनाथाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री नटराजने नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री भैरवने नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री नंदीमहेश्वराय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री शिवपार्वतीये नमः। हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम। I will recite Upadesa Saram. Slowly. कर्तुराज्ञया पदे फलं कर्म किंबरं कर्म गज्जडं कृतिमहदो वदन कारणं फलमशाश्वतं सुरभिनिरोधकम् ईश्वरात्मिकं नेचया कृतं सिद्धसोदकम् मुक्तिसाधकम् कायवाङ्मन कार्यमुद्गमम् भूधनं जव चिन्तनं प्रमाद जगतैषधी युग्धसेवनम् अष्टमूर्तिः देवपूजनम् उत्तमस्तवा दुज्जमन्दग सिद्धजं जव ज्ञानमुत्तमम् आद्यधारया श्रोदशासमम् सुवर्णसिद्धं विरलभरम् वेदभावना सौवमित्यसो भावनाभिधा भावनीमदा भावशून्यस भावसुस्तुति भावनाबला भक्तिरुत्तमा गिरुस्तने मन स्वस्थता क्रिया भक्ति योग बोधाशरीरम् वायुरोदना दीयते मन जालभक्षिव रोदसाधनम् सिद्धवायव सिद्क्रियायुधा सागयोर्द्वयी शक्तिमूलदा लय विनाशने उभयरोदने लय कदं पुनर्भवति नो मृदम् प्राणबन्धना दीनमानसम् एकचिन्तना नाशमेत्यग मानसो दृष्टयोगिन नित्यमस्ति स्वस्थिरं यद दृश्यवारिदं चित्तमात्मनः चित्वदर्शनं तत्त्वदर्शनं मानसं तुगिं मार्गणे नैव मानसं मार्गार्जवा वृद्धयस्त्वहं वृद्धिमास्त्रिदा वृद्धयो मनो विद्यहं मन अहमयं कुतो भवति चिन्वद ऐपदत्यहं निजविसारणम् अहमिनाशभाक् नहमहं दया स्फुरधीरस्वयं परमपूर्णस इदमहं वदा अभिज्ञमन्वहम् अहमिलीनते अव्ययशक्तया विक्रयेन्द्रिय प्राणधीदम नामसेकस दज्जडं सस सत्त्ववासुदा विद्भवेदरा श्रद्धया युति सिद्धयायहम् ईसजीवयो वेषदीपिता सस्वभावतो वस्तु केवलम् वेषानद स्वात्मदर्शनम् ईसदर्शनम् स्वात्मरूपत आत्मसंस्थिति स्वात्मदर्शनम् आत्मनिर्भयात् आत्मनिष्ठा ज्ञानवर्धिता अज्ञानहीनति ज्ञानमस्ति ज्ञातुमन्तरम् किं स्वरूपमे आत्मदर्शने अव्यया भवा अपूर्णसृष्टिम् बन्धमुक्त्यदि अमरं सुखं विन्दति यदि वस्तुतैव अहमवेदगं निजविमानगं महति तं तपो रमणवादियं महति तं तपो रमणवादियं महति तं तपो रमणवादियम्
Narayanji, thank you so much. Namo Ramana. Once again, a very warm welcome to all the devotees for attending Ramana Kendra Delhi's Sunday Satsang with Mr. Michael James. I will quickly once again introduce Mr. James and then request him to take over. Mr. James started his spiritual journey at Tiruvannamalai during his visit to India in 1976, where he stayed for over 20 years. He had a long friendship and association with Sri Sadhu Om and assisted him in translating Guru Vachaka Kovai, Nanyar, Ulladu Narpadu, and other works of Bhagavan into English. Mr. Michael James is now based in London, where he regularly discusses Bhagavan's teachings with fellow devotees via email and Zoom, focusing primarily on explaining his original Tamil writings and articles and writes articles for his blog. He addresses devotees of Ramana Kendra Delhi every second Sunday of the month. Sir, may I please request you to address the devotees now?
Namaskaram. Today I'm going to answer a series of questions that I've been asked. The first one is was asked by Sushil Motwani. What he asked is, Bhagavan has mentioned that even thinking that I am not realized is an obstacle. Are there any other such obstacles which we may not realize as obstacles to self-realization or practice of self-inquiry? We need to understand why Bhagavan has said, but even thinking I am not realized is an obstacle. That is, the path Bhagavan has shown us is to investigate what we actually are. Who am I? We shouldn't start off with any preconceived ideas. Thinking I am not realized it's a preconceived idea. Who is it who is not realized? It is only ego which is not realized. Ego can never be realized. What we are to investigate, ego is what we now seem to be. So long as we rise as ego, we identify ourselves as a person, and so we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So not being aware of ourselves as we actually are is what is described as not being realized. So we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are. Our aim is to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. To be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to withdraw our attention from all other things and focus it only on ourselves. In other words, we need to, our attention, which habitually goes outwards, away from ourselves towards other things, we need to redirect it away from other things back towards ourselves. In other words, we shouldn't be allowing our attention to move away from ourselves. When we focus our attention on ourselves, we are thereby investigating what we actually are. If we attend to ourselves keenly enough, ego will thereby subside and dissolve back into its source. And what will remain is just pure awareness, which is the source from which we've risen. That pure awareness is what we actually are. That pure awareness is never unrealized. It is always knows itself as itself. So our aim is complete surrender, to lose ourselves in the infinite clarity of pure awareness, but we actually are. So any idea we have about ourselves, if we think I am realized or I am not realized, or I am Brahman or Shivoham or Aham Brahmasmi or Soham, thinking anything about what we are or what we are not is not helping us to know what we actually are. What we can know what we actually are only by being keenly self-attentive. So we need to be so keenly self-attentive, but we don't give room to the rising of any other thought. So thinking I am not realized cannot possibly help us. That is, we are identifying, when we say I am not realized, we are identifying we are attaching ourselves to a certain idea. I am not realized. We are neither realized nor unrealized. What we are is only ourself. As Bhagavan said, the ultimate truth that we will discover is not even I am Brahman. The ultimate truth we will discover is I am I. Because what is Brahman? Brahman is nothing other than I. So when it is said I am Brahman, what I am Brahman actually means is I am only I. Because Brahman is not aware of itself as I am Brahman. Brahman is aware of itself only as I. So the ultimate truth, what we are going to discover about ourselves, is that we are nothing other than ourselves. I am only I. That is what Bhagavan has taught us. But we shouldn't even be thinking I am I. We need to be just investigating I, and we will then find what we will then experience ourselves as we actually are. In the 10th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says, however great a sinner one may be, if instead of lamenting and weeping, I am a sinner, how am I going to be saved? One completely rejects the thought that one is a sinner and is steadfast in self-attentiveness, one will certainly be saved, or one will certainly be reformed, is what it literally means. So when we may be a very great sinner, but by thinking I'm a sinner, or how am I going to be saved, we are not helping ourselves. What we need to do, the sinner that we seem to be a sinner only when we rise as ego. The very rising of ego is as Bhagavan said, that is the original sin. So we are all sinners. The fact that we've risen as ego is itself a great sin. But by lamenting, oh, I'm a sinner, we are just only attaching ourselves to a certain identification. So we shouldn't think we are a sinner. We shouldn't think we are not realized. We shouldn't think anything. We should only attend to ourselves to find out who am I. So any thought is when we think any thought other than about ourselves, our attention is going away from ourselves. So, and thinking of ourselves is not actually thinking; it is just being ourselves. That is, attending to ourselves is not a doing; it's a state of just being. So, allowing our attention to move away from ourselves in any way whatsoever is an obstacle. So, to avoid all obstacles, all we need to do is to cling tenaciously to self-attentiveness. As Bhagavan said in the previous sentence of that same 10th paragraph of Nana, without giving room even to a doubting thought, putting an end to so many vasanas, is it possible to remain only as Swarupa, as our real nature, as what we actually are? Instead of giving room even to that doubting thought, it is necessary to cling tenaciously to self-attentiveness. Sarupa dhyanate vidapidiyai pidikavendam. So the path that Bhagavan has taught us is clinging tenaciously to self-attentiveness, holding on to that fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. That is the path. Anything that distracts our attention away from ourselves is an obstacle. So let us not allow our attention to move away from ourselves. The inclination we have to attend to anything other than ourselves, the inclinations are what Bhagavan referred to as Vishaya Vasanas. Vasanas means inclinations. Vishaya means objects or phenomena, anything other than ourselves. So the inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves, even to thoughts such as I am Brahman or I am Shiva or whatever, even those, we should set aside all thoughts and turn our attention back towards ourselves to find out who we are. So we shouldn't think I am this or I am that or I am not this or I am not that. We should attend only to I am. That is the path. So not allowing our attention to be diverted away from ourselves is the way to avoid all obstacles. When we allow our attention to move away from ourselves, then so many obstacles may ensue. Why should we allow whatever obstacles we face? Doesn't matter. As Bhagavan says, to whom does all this appear? So if any obstacle appears, to whom does it appear? It appears only to me. So we turn our attention back to ourselves. So the whole aim, the sole aim of our sole aim in following Bhagavan's teachings is to try more and more to be self-attentive. And if we read Bhagavan's teachings carefully and deeply and reflect over what they mean, we will see that everything that Bhagavan has taught us has one purpose and one purpose alone: to turn our attention back to ourselves. So that should be our focus. Allowing our attention to move away from ourselves to anything else, that is an obstacle. So we shouldn't think I am realized or I am not realized. I am Brahman, I am Shiva, I am he, I am not this body, I'm not this mind. This is all allowing our attention to move away from ourselves. These are all thoughts. All thoughts are anya. They're something other than ourselves. We should be attending only to that fundamental awareness, I am. So long as we hold on to I am, we are on the right path. So Bhagavan's path is actually so simple. We just have to, why it seems to us to be difficult is because of our lack of love, because we are more interested in knowing about other things than in knowing who am I. If we had so much love to know who am I, but we now have to know about other things, we would know what we actually are and the story would be over. That we would turn our attention back within and we would merge in our source. Why don't we turn our attention back full 180 degrees back within and thereby merge in our source? Because we are still too attached to other things. We're still too interested in our little life as this person we now seem to be. We need to give up interest in everything other than knowing who am I. That we can, but we can only start from where from where we are now standing. Now we do have interest in other things, so we have to wean our mind off its interest in other things. How do we wean our mind off our interest in other things? Only by persevering in this simple practice of self-investigation and self-surrender. The more we follow this path Bhagavan has taught us, the more our interest in other things will drop off, and our interest, our love to know ourselves will increase. So we just have to persevere. As Bhagavan says, we need to Swarupa Dhyanate Vida Pidiyai Pidikavendam. We need to cling tenaciously to self-attentiveness. That should be our sole aim. So that's the first question I was asked. All the other questions are ones that I was, they were questions that were sent by the ashram president, Dr. Anand, back at the time of Bhagavan's last Jayanti, for me to answer at that time, but because I was talking on another subject, I didn't get to answer any of them. So I answered a few of them during our meeting last month, and I'll answer some more now. So the next question is, at the core of Bhagavan's teachings is giving up our sense of doership. Can you offer any guidelines as to how to identify the subtle sense of doership in our actions? The sense of doership is actually not so subtle. It's very gross. We are all aware of ourselves as a doer. That is, why do we have this sense of doership? So long as we rise as ego, we identify ourselves as a person, as a body consisting of 5 sheaths. So through this, this body consisting of 5 sheaths, there are 3 instruments of action. There's mind, speech, and body. So these are the 3 instruments of action through which we're acting. Because we take this mind, speech, and body to be ourselves, any actions that are done by mind, speech, or body are experienced by us as actions done by us. I am thinking, I am talking, I am walking, I am standing, I'm sitting, I'm working. All that is whatever any of these instruments of action, mind, speech, or body may be doing, are experienced by us as I am doing this. Why is it experienced by us as I'm doing this? Because we experience these 3 instruments as ourselves. So long as we rise as ego, we experience ourselves as a body consisting of 5 sheaths, and consequently, whatever actions are done by this, by these 5 sheaths, through these 5 sheaths, are experienced by us as actions done by ourselves. So how do we give up the sense of doership? We can give up the sense of doership only by investigating ourselves and knowing what we actually are. Because when we know what we actually are, we will cease rising as ego, and thereby we will cease experiencing ourselves as if we were these 5 sheaths. This is made very clear by Bhagavan in verse 38 of Uludunapadu. What he says in verse 38 of Uludunapadu is, Vinay mudal namayin, vile payan twipo. If we are a doer of action, we will experience the resulting fruit. So doership and experiencership go hand in hand. So long as we experience ourselves as a doer, we also experience ourselves as the experiencer of the fruit. So everything that we experience in our present life is prarabdha, which is a selection of the fruits of actions that we've done in past lives. It's not a random selection. It's been selected by Bhagavan for our own spiritual benefit. Which fruit will be most conducive to our progressing on this, to our development on this spiritual path? Those fruit he has allotted for us to experience in this lifetime. So everything that we experience is the fruit of actions that we've done in the past. So long as there's doership, there will also be experiencership. And so long as there's experiencership, there will always also be doership. So the 2 are inseparable, because we are the doer of actions, and we are the one who experience the resulting fruit. That is when I say we are the doer of actions. So long as we rise as ego, we are the doer of actions. So in order to cease being the doer of actions, and to consequently cease being the experience of any fruit of action, we need to cease rising as ego. So how do we cease rising as ego? This is what Bhagavan explains in the next sentence, in which he says, Vinay mudal endru vinavi that is Vinvi Tanne Arya, when one knows oneself by investigating who is the doer of action, Kartrutvam poi, the doership will depart, karmam mundrum karalam, all the three actions will slip off. All the three karmas will slip off. What are the three karmas? They are agamya, sanchita, and prarabdha. Agamya is whatever actions we do under the sway of our vasanas are agamya. So we are constantly, so long as we allow our attention to move away from ourselves, we are constantly doing agamya to a greater or lesser extent. So, and agamya are the actions that bear fruit. The fruit of those actions gets stored in sanchita, which is, sanchita simply means a heap or pile. So that's the store of the actions we've done in the past. And prarabdha is a selection of those fruit that have been chosen by Bhagavan for us to experience in this lifetime. These are the three karmas, agamya, sanchita, and prarabdha. Agamya requires a doer. It's only when we have a doer of action that we can do agamya. Sanchita and prarabdha are the fruit of actions. So only when we're the experiencer can we experience them. So who is the doer of action and the experiencer of the fruit? It's only ego. When we investigate ourselves and to know who is the doer of action, the doer, that is ego, will cease to exist, and we will remain as a pure awareness I am, which is not doing anything, which is just being, pure being, Sat Chit. So pure being and pure awareness, that is what we actually are. When we remain as Sat Chit, we are neither the doer of any action nor the experiencer of any fruit. So that's why Bhagavan says, right, when we investigate ourselves, doership will depart. Why will doership depart? Because ego departs. When ego ceases to exist, who has the sense of doership? It's only ego. So long as there's ego, there'll be doership and experiencership, kartrutva and bhoktrutva. When ego ceases to exist, kartrutva and bhoktrutva will also cease to exist. Without kartrutva or bhoktrutva, there cannot be any of the three karmas. So all the three karmas will slip off. And what then remains, he says, nittama mukti nilay. This is the state of liberation, which is eternal. When he says it's eternal, he doesn't mean that we attain that liberation and then it lasts forever. No, eternal means not only what has no end, also what has no beginning. We are even now in that state of liberation. That is our true nature, is ever liberated. That's why he says, Nittama Mukti Nilay. So our real nature is ever liberated. It's only because we've risen as ego that we now seem to be in bondage. So the solution is we investigate ourselves. When we investigate ourselves, we know what we actually are. Therefore, we know that we were never ego. We had never risen as ego. We were ever in that state of liberation. So the way to overcome doership, we can overcome doership only by surrendering ego. And we can surrender ego only by investigating what we actually are. So the guidelines Bhagavan has given us to root out this sense of doership is to investigate ourselves and thereby root out ego, the very nature, whose nature is to have a sense of doership, because ego always identifies itself with the instruments of action. So it always experiences itself as the doer of those actions and consequently as the experiencer of the fruit of those actions. So the question is that I was asked, can you offer any guidelines to identify the subtle sense of doership? The subtle sense of doership is that I which rises as I am this body, I am this person. So, so long as we rise as ego, we will experience ourselves as a doer of action. So we need to investigate ego, find out what we actually are, thereby ego will dissolve back into its source and its doership and experiencership will dissolve along with it. And what will then remain is what we actually are, which as Bhagavan says in verse 28 of Uladunaptu, if one knows what the real nature of oneself is, pin, then Anadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda. What we actually are is beginningless, Anadi. Ananta. Ananta means endless, limitless, or infinite. Akanda means unbroken. That means indivisible. Satchidananda. That is what we always actually are. Because it's beginningless and endless, we are always that. Even now we are that. And it's also unbroken. So we don't take a break from being Satchidananda to rise as ego. We are always Satchidananda. Ego is just an illusory appearance. So long as we are looking outwards, we seem to be ego. So let us stop looking outwards. Let us turn our attention back within, and thereby let this ego dissolve back into its source, along with its doership and experiencership. And then we realize that we are, the state of liberation that then remains is we will then recognize that to be our eternal state, eternal and ever uninterrupted, akanda. That is our real nature. So then the next question I've been asked is, what are the signs that we are making progress and that we are the recipients of Bhagavan's grace? Bhagavan's grace is what is always shining in our heart as I. So long as we are aware of our own existence, I am, as we always are, we are the recipients of Bhagavan's grace. Why does he, why is he shining in our heart as I, his grace? Because he's always making himself available to us. He's always offering himself to us. He's our nearest and dearest. So Bhagavan's grace is never lacking. We are all the recipients of Bhagavan's grace. What is lacking is our grace. Instead of being graceful to Bhagavan, if we were graceful to Bhagavan, we would attend only to him, shining in our heart as I, and thereby we would surrender ourselves to him. But instead of surrendering ourselves to him, we are misusing that light of awareness, which originates from that fundamental awareness I am. We are misusing it to know things in the world. So it's not Bhagavan's grace that is lacking, it is our grace that is lacking. We are being very graceful to the world and ignoring Bhagavan. So let's stop ignoring Bhagavan. Bhagavan is ever shining in our heart as I. So let's turn back within and with great love, my heart melting with love, attending only to him in our heart as I am. That is, then we are opening our heart. We are availing of his grace. He's always making his grace available to us, but we are not availing ourselves of it. We are misusing it to know other things. We should yield ourselves to that by turning within, by surrendering ourselves to him. And then we are not obstructing the work of his grace. Then his grace will finish off this ego in no time if we surrender ourselves to him. Regarding the earlier part of the question, what are the signs that we are making progress? Bhagavan often said, there is only one real sign of progress, and that is perseverance. That is, if we are persevering in trying to turn our attention back within, then we are certainly progressing. If we are not even trying to turn our attention back within, then we are not progressing. It's obvious. You cannot succeed in any endeavor without trying. The very fact that you are trying means you're proceeding in the right direction. So long as we are trying to be self-attentive, we are progressing. So the sign of being self-attentive, of making progress is is persevering in being self-attentive. So the more we persevere, the more we are making progress. So the only real sign that we're making progress is the fact that we are persevering in the practice. So we can each judge for ourselves to what extent we are persevering in the practice. I think most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we will have to admit, I'm not persevering enough. It's inevitably, if we were persevering enough, we would be finished very in no time. But so we still have Vishaya Vasanas. So we still allow ourselves to be swayed by our Vishaya Vasanas and thereby to allow our attention to move away from ourselves. We need to persevere in trying to hold on to self-attentiveness more and more. The more we hold on to self-attentiveness, the weaker the Vishaya vasanas will grow and the stronger the Sattvasana will grow. Sattvasana means the inclination just to be as we actually are. We can be as we actually are only by knowing ourselves as we actually are. And we can know ourselves as we actually are only by holding fast to self-attentiveness. Vida, Sarupa Dhyanate Vida Pidiyai Pidikavendum, as Bhagavan said in the 10th paragraph of Nana. It is necessary to cling tenaciously to Swarupa Dhyana, to self-attentiveness. So long as we are trying to, we may not be succeeding very well, but so long as we are trying, we are making progress. We're moving in the right direction. Whether we succeed or not, that's not, that shouldn't be our concern. Our concern we should be trying. So long as we are trying, we're moving in the right direction, and success is assured. Eventually, we will certainly succeed. So long as we try. If we don't try, then we can't complain if we're not making progress. As Bhagavan says, Bhagavan gives us a very great assurance in the 12th paragraph of Nana. Kadavalam Guruvam Unmayil Verala. God and Guru are in truth not different. Pulli Vayal Pattadu, Evaru Tirambado, just as what has been caught in the jaws of a tiger will not return or cannot escape, Avare, likewise, Guruvin Arulpavayal Patavagal, Avaral Rakshika Padavarayandri, Orukalum Kai Vidapada. So just like those, what has been caught in the jaws of a tiger cannot escape, likewise, those who have been caught in the look or glance of Guru's grace will never be forsaken and will surely be saved by him. So who has been caught in the look or glance of Guru's grace? We have all been caught in the look of his grace. Why? The very fact that we've been attracted to his teachings, attracted to his path, the very fact we're asking these questions and wanting to understand how to follow his path, that is a clear sign that we have already been caught in the look of his grace. So he's given us an assurance. We will never be forsaken and will surely be saved by him. However, he adds an important caveat. Eninum, Guru Kartiya Varipadi Tavaradu Narikavendum. Nevertheless, it is necessary to walk unfailingly in accordance with the path that Guru has shown us. So what is the path that he has shown us? Turning our attention more and more within. So we need to follow this path. So long as we are trying our best to follow this path, he will take care of everything else. We can leave everything, all other cares and concerns we can leave to him. All we have to do is to try our best to be self-attentive more and more and more. So long as we are trying, that is the clear sign that we are progressing. As Bhagavan said, perseverance is the only genuine, the only true sign of progress. Then the next question I was asked is there a dramatic point in a spiritual seeker's life when he or she gets a glimpse of the self all of a sudden? Or is spiritual awakening a gradual process? That is, what is called the self is what Bhagavan called Atmaswarupa, the real nature of ourself. What we actually are is Atmaswarupa. What we actually are is pure awareness. Pure awareness can never be an object of knowledge. We can know pure awareness only by being pure awareness. So long as we rise as ego, we cannot get a glimpse. That is, you can get a glimpse of something other than yourself. How can you get a glimpse of yourself? We are always aware of ourselves as I am, but because we have risen as ego, we are not aware of ourselves as just I am. We're aware of ourselves as I am this person, I am Michael, or I am such and such a person. So long as we rise as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am, but we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are. What we actually are is only I and nothing other than I. But now we're aware of ourselves as if we were something other than I. So it's not a matter of getting a glimpse of something other than ourselves. We need to see what we actually are. In order to see what we actually are, we need to turn within. The more we turn within, the greater the degree of clarity of self-awareness we will experience. That is, we are always aware of ourselves, but we'll be more and more clearly aware of ourselves, not as I am this or I am that, but just as I am I. That clarity of self-awareness, that fresh clarity of self-awareness that we experience to the extent to which we turn within is what Bhagavan called Spurana. Spurana simply means shining. In this context, it means that fresh clarity of self-awareness that we experience to the extent to which we turn within. So the more we turn within, the more brightly Spurana will shine. That Spurana is nothing other than ourself. It's a shining of ourself. It's a clarity of self-awareness. So if that is what you mean by a glimpse of the self, it's not to call it a glimpse of the self is a rather crude way of saying it, because you can only gain a glimpse of an object, but you cannot gain a glimpse of your own reality. But the more we attend to ourselves, the more clearly we are aware of ourselves, not as I am this or I am that, but just as I am I. That's why Bhagavan said that clarity of that fresh clarity of awareness that shines as I am I, that is what Bhagavan called Spurana. So the more we turn within, the more clearly and brightly Spurana will shine. So we should hold on to that Spurana. That clarity of self-awareness is what we need to hold on to. The more we hold on to that, the more ego will subside and dissolve back into its source. And when ego dissolves completely in its source, then that Bhagavan described that as the subsidence of Spurana. Why did he call it the subsidence of Spurana? It's not the clarity that subsides. It ceases to appear something new or fresh, because we recognize it as sahaja. We recognize it as what we actually are. So regarding the second question, is spiritual awakening a gradual progress? No, spiritual awakening happens in a moment, but that is, either ego is alive or it is dead. It cannot be half alive, half dead. So there cannot be any gradual dying of ego. But what is gradual is the process of self-investigation, because the more we turn our attention within, the more our Vishaya vasanas are weakened and the Sat vasana is strengthened. In other words, the more our desires and attachments will drop off. So there is a gradual process. The spiritual path is a gradual process, but that is all just a preparation for the final spiritual awakening. So when we are turning our attention within, what we are trying to do is to turn our attention a full 180 degrees back towards ourselves. That means our attention is now facing outwards towards things other than ourselves. We want to turn it 180 degrees away from all other things, back towards ourselves. When we succeed in turning the full 180 degrees, we will thereby cease to be aware of anything else, and we will be aware only of ourselves. That state in which we are aware of nothing other than ourselves, that is the state of pure awareness. When we experience ourselves with pure awareness, ego is thereby destroyed. So we need to turn 180 degrees just for one split second. One split second will destroy ego, and then we can never turn back again to see the world, because there's nothing other than ourselves exists. We alone exist. So then there's no question of turning. There's no inside or outside or self or non-self. There is only pure being. That is what we actually are. So the ultimate aim of all our spiritual endeavor is to surrender ego. The surrender of ego will happen in a moment. One moment ego will be there, next moment it will vanish, because we will vanish only when we are aware of ourselves as just pure awareness. Ego is nothing but a wrong awareness of ourselves. As ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am this or I am that. Whereas what we actually are is only I am I. So when we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, as pure awareness, ego will be destroyed forever. That happens in a moment. But everything before that is just a preparation. We are trying more and more to turn our attention within. We are thereby weakening our Vishaya vasanas and consequently all our desires and attachments and so on. And we are strengthening the Sat vasana, the love to know and to be what we actually are. So if what you mean, if what this person meant by a glimpse of the self is that what Bhagavan calls sparana, that fresh clarity of self-awareness, yes, we can experience that here and now. To the extent to which we attend to ourselves, to that extent we are experiencing sparana. People have misunderstood what Bhagavan meant by sparana. Some people say it's some sort of vibration or something. That is totally misunderstanding it. It is simply a fresh clarity. A fresh clarity of what? Not a clarity of anything else, a clarity of our own being. So we will be more and more clearly aware of ourselves as just I, not as anything other than I. That fresh clarity of self-awareness, that clarity, oh, I am nothing other than just I, nothing other than this fundamental awareness I am. That will become clearer and clearer the deeper we go in this path. So the more we turn towards ourselves, the more brightly that sparana will shine. But we shouldn't think of sparana as something new or something other than ourselves. It is ourselves. We are nothing. It is nothing other than ourselves. It is just the shining of ourselves. It's just the clarity of self-awareness. So I hope that I've adequately answered that question. Then the next question is, what are the signs of one who follows Bhagavan's Vichara Marga versus others who follow the path of devotion? If we are genuinely following Bhagavan's path, we will not see any difference between Vichara and Bhakti. They are one and the same thing. That is, the path of devotion begins with us taking God to be something other than ourselves. That is what Bhagavan describes in verse 8 of Upadeshundya as Anya Bhava. So the path of devotion begins with Anya Bhava. We take God to be something other than ourselves. But as we progress more and more in the path of devotion, we come to recognize, who am I other than God? I cannot be anything other than God. So we begin to recognize God isn't something other than ourselves. God is that which is always shining in our heart as I. Recognizing that he shines in our heart as I, and therefore attending to him only as I, that is what Bhagavan calls Ananya Bhava. So in verse 8 of Upadeshundya, he says, rather than Anya Bhava, Ananya Bhava, in which he is I, is anatima uttamam, it is best among all. So from that, though the path of devotion begins with devotion to God as if God were someone other than ourselves, it merges into the path of Ananya Bhakti. Recognizing that God is not something other than ourselves. He is that which is shining as in heart, shining in our heart as I. As soon as we come to this Ananya Bhakti, what is called Ananya Bhakti is another name for Vichara Marga. So the pinnacle of the path of devotion is the path of Vichara. So this Vichara is not something other than devotion. It is just mature devotion. It's devotion in which we recognize that God is not something other than ourselves. God is that which is always shining in us as I. God, Guru, as Bhagavan often used to say, God, Guru, and Atma. God, Guru, and oneself are all one and the same. So God is that, God or Guru, Bhagavan, is that which is always shining in our heart as I. So attending to him as I, that is Vichara Marga, and that is the pinnacle of the path of devotion. That's why in verse 8, as I say, Bhagavan said, rather than Anya Bhava, devotion to God as something other than ourselves, Ananya Bhava, in which he is I, Avanaham Aham Ananya Bhavam, Anatimum Uttamanam. That alone is the best among all. And then in the next paragraph, in the in the next verse, in the 10th, in the 9th verse of Upadesha Undya, he says, Bhava Balatinal. Bhava Balatinal means by the strength of meditation. That's referring to the what meditation? The Ananya Bhava that he referred to in the previous sentence. So Bhava Balatina means by the strength of meditation. It here implies by the strength of Ananya Bhava. In other words, by the strength of Swarupa Dhyana, of meditating on ourselves, meditating on nothing other than ourselves. By the strength of that, and Bhava Balatinal, Bhavanatita Bhava Tirutale Undipara, Parabhakti Tattva Undipara. Being in Sat Bhava, that's being in the state of being, which is Bhavanatita, which transcends Bhavana, which transcends meditation as a mental activity, that transcends thinking. That alone is Parabhakti Tattva. So the true devotion is not to attend to God as something other than ourselves. That's also good up to a certain point. But ultimately, we need to come to this part of Ananya Bhakti, where we recognize God is that which is shining in our heart as I. When we turn our attention within, turning our attention within is not an action. It is a cessation of all action. We rise as ego by looking outwards. When we turn our attention back within towards ourselves, ego and all its activities subsides. That's why Bhagavan says it's Bhavanatita Sat Bhava tu Iritale. Just being in that state of being, which is beyond all mental activity, bhavana. That is Parabhakti Tattva. That is the supreme devotion. So if we understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly, his path is, this is the path of pure devotion. We cannot, that is, Bhagavan often used to say, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Without love, we cannot succeed in this path. So it requires great love to follow this path of bhakti, this path of vichara, because as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunaptu, Ahandayundayin Anaitmundahum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahandayin Indra Anatam. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ahandaye Yavamam. Ego itself is everything. Adalal Yadu Idu Endru Nadale Ovadal Yavamena or. Therefore, know that investigating what this is, that means investigating what this ego is giving up everything. Why is it giving up everything? Because when we, to the extent to which we investigate ego, ego will subside. And since everything else depends for its seeming existence upon ego, only when ego comes into existence, other things come into existence. So when ego subsides, everything else will subside along with it. So we need to have so much love, but we are ready to surrender ourselves as ego and give up everything else along with it. Then only we can succeed in this path. So this is the path of the purest devotion, the Parabhakti Tattva. This is the path of complete surrender. As Bhagavan said, what is in the 13th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan defines what is surrender. Anma Chintane Tavira, Vera Chintane Kalambavadaku Satram Idum Kadamo. That means without giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than the thought of oneself, Atmanishta Paranai Iripte, thereby being Atmanishta Param, being one who is firmly established with oneself, Tande Isanuku Alipadam. That alone is giving oneself to God. So in order to give ourselves to God, in order to surrender ourselves completely, we need to be so keenly self-attentive that we give no room to the rising of any other thought. So this is the Bhagavan's path of vichara, is the purest and most refined path of bhakti. This is bhakti in its purest form. So there is no distinction between vichara and bhakti. If we're truly following the path of vichara, that is truly following the path of devotion. Without heart-melting love, to know and to be what we actually are, we cannot succeed in this path. And what we actually are, that is Bhagavan. So our love to know and to be what we actually are is true love for Bhagavan. So this is bhakti in its purest form. The next question I was asked is Bhagavan's path a solitary one? What is the role of meeting in a group for satsang in Bhagavan's path? Yes, Bhagavan's path is clearly a solitary one. That is, there's just us and Bhagavan is nothing other than ourselves. So in a sense, we are just on our own in this path because we are turning our attention away from all other things back within. So nobody can accompany us back within. But when we turn within, who is there shining in our heart as I? That is Bhagavan. So now Bhagavan seems to us to be something other than ourselves. So long as Bhagavan seems to be something other than ourselves, we can say we have Bhagavan always on our side, always accompanying us on this path. But the path is to lose ourselves completely in Bhagavan. So yes, it is a solitary path in the sense that no others can accompany on this path. The only one who accompanies us on this path is Bhagavan. But he is not anything other than ourselves. He is what we actually are. So this is a solitary path. It is a journey from ourselves to ourselves. That is why the ultimate goal is called Kaivalya. Kaivalya means the state of perfect oneness, or state of isolation. We are isolated from everything else because we alone are what actually exists. We are nothing other than Bhagavan, and he is what actually exists. However we want to put it, it all amounts to the same thing. So this is the path of oneness. So it is definitely a solitary path. So then what role does meeting in a group like this have? The only benefit in meeting as a group or discussing with our fellow devotees is that when we are meeting. Why are we meeting? We are meeting to discuss and to think about his teachings. So sometimes by discussing Bhagavan's teachings with fellow devotees, we're able to clarify our own understanding. And sometimes other people may say things that, oh, that's what Bhagavan means. It may help us to clarify our understanding of Bhagavan's teachings. That is the only role, any type of discussion about his teachings among his devotees. That's the only function of it. Nowadays, people refer to such meetings where we get together and discuss his teachings as satsanga. This is not satsanga in its purest form. Bhagavan has explained what is satsanga. Satsanga means association with Sat. What is Sat? We alone are Sat. So the true satsanga is turning our attention within, being self-attentive, practicing atmavichara. That is the purest form of satsanga. However, that's the direct satsanga. We're directly contacting Sat, which is ourself. However, when our attention comes outwards, keeping our mind dwelling on his teachings encourages us to turn back within. So talking about his teachings, reading his teachings, thinking about his teachings, that is an indirect form of satsanga. But direct satsanga is only attending to I. Indirect satsanga is thinking of his teachings, which encourages us to attend to I. So by discussing his teachings with the other devotees, that is useful to the extent to which it encourages us to turn our attention back within. That is the sole purpose of his teaching, is to turn our attention back within. The next question is a very similar question. What is the role of friendship with fellow devotees in our sadhana? the role of friendship with fellow devotees is that we can encourage each other. If we talk about Bhagavan's teachings and keep our mind focused on his teachings will be encouraging us to turn within. So discussing his teachings with fellow devotees is useful to the extent to which it encourages us to turn our attention within. The next question I was asked is, how does one recognize karma that is conducive to spiritual growth and learn to avoid getting entangled in unnecessary karma that is not spiritually beneficial? It is not the action itself that is the problem. It is the desire with which we do action. As Bhagavan says in verse 2 of Upadeshundya, Bhagavan says, the fruit of action passes away. It's transitory. The fruit of action doesn't last. As soon as you experience the fruit of any action, it passes away. But though the fruit of action passes away, what remains is the seed. The seed is our vasanas, our inclination to act. So the vasanas are what causes us to fall in the ocean of action. The vasanas are the seeds of desire. So the cause for falling in the ocean of action, Kriti Mahodado Pasana Karanam, what is that Karanam? As Bhagavan says in the Tamil original, it is the seeds. The seed, what he refers to as seeds is the vasanas. So our vasanas are what, it's under the sway of our vasanas that we do action, and thereby we get caught in, we're drowning in this great ocean of action. So how to become disentangled from this ocean of action? We cannot, by doing more action with desire, we cannot become disentangled. In fact, no action can free us from this. However, as he says in verse 3, if we act without desire for any fruit, that is, instead of karmiya karma, if we do nishkarmiya karma, that's action that is not motivated by desire for any fruit, then what is it motivated by? He says, kartanukakam nishkarmiya karma, done for love, done for God. So what does that imply? It implies done for the love of God. So if we act not with the expectation of getting any result, but just for the love of God, such action will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. How will it show the way to liberation? Because when we are acting without desire, when we're acting just for the love of God, that will purify our mind. And in the pure mind, it will become clear that the way to liberation is not doing anything, but just being. So how to be? Only by turning our attention back within, as he makes clear later in verses 8 and 9. So we need to eventually come to a point that we recognize that God is that which is shining in our heart as I. So the best way of worshiping God is not doing any action by mind, speech, or body. It is only turning our attention within and meditating only on I. That is not a doing, but a state of being. So by the strength of that meditation on I, we thereby remain in Satbhava, which is Bhavanatita, and that is Parabhakti Tattva. So all these Bhagavan's teachings, they're all so neatly tied together. So to avoid getting entangled in unnecessary action, the most effective way is simply to turn our attention within. And even when our attention comes outwards and we do engage in action, we shouldn't act with any expectation of result. We act in whatever way we consider to be, whatever seems to us to be the appropriate way of acting, we act accordingly. We leave, but concerned about the fruit. We surrender the fruit to Bhagavan. It's up to Bhagavan. What should be the outcome of the action is entirely in his hands. We do what, if we are acting out of love for Bhagavan, we do what we consider to be the right thing to do, but without any expectation of any result. If we do it like that, that is a karma done for the love of God, and that will purify the mind. But what is the benefit of purifying the mind? That purifying mind in that purified mind, it will become clear that the way to overcome all action is not to do any action at all. It is only to turn within and investigate, who am I? So slowly, slowly, we need to wean our mind off interest in all other things. If we are not interested in anything other than knowing ourselves, whatever actions we do will not be motivated by any desire for any fruit. So that'll be nishkarmiya karma. But so we need, and ultimately, the more we surrender ourselves, the more we are not rising as ego to do anything according to our own will. So whatever actions are done by our mind, speech, and body will be actions that they are made to do by Bhagavan in accordance with our prarabdha. As he said in the first sentence of the note to his mother, Avarava prarabdha prakaram adakanavan angangiritu artavipan. According to the prarabdha of each one, he who is for that will, being there, I mean, being in the heart of each one of them, artavipan will make them dance, will make them act. So whatever actions we need to do in order for our prarabdha to unfold, we'll be made to do. That doesn't mean that all the actions we do are actions we're made to do. Many of our actions we are doing under the sway of our vasanas, but those actions which we are necessary for the unfoldment of our prarabdha, those we will be made to do. So if we are turning our attention within and thereby surrendering ourselves to Bhagavan, we will not be doing any action under the sway of our vasanas. So whatever actions are done by body, speech, and mind will be actions that he is making the body, speech, and mind do. So we will be detached from those actions. We'll be unaffected by those actions. So the real answer to this question is turn within more and more and more and more. We don't have to worry about it's not whether a particular action is conducive or not. It's not the action that decides whether it is kamya or nishkamya. It's the attitude with which we do it. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa worshipped Kali. That was a pure nishkamya karma because he had pure love for Kali. He wasn't worshipping her for anything other than love of Kali. So many other people do the same puja to Kali, but they're doing it for some, because with some expectation of a result. So it's not the action that determines whether it's binding or not. It is the love with which we do it. If we're doing it with love for gaining some fruit, then that is binding us. If we're doing it just for the love of God, it will not bind us. But the best is not to be concerned about karma at all, to turn our attention back within. Who am I, the doer of action? That is what we need to do. There are more questions, but I think we can keep them for another time because I think I was asked to finish today's meeting promptly because some people have to catch the train to go home. So I think this is just about the time to stop, isn't it?
Thank you so much, Mr. James. That's very, very kind of you. And we will, of course, reconvene next month, same day, same time. And any or other questions that I receive shall be compiled for your attention and further guidance. Before we proceed for Akshar, Manamalai, and Aarti, I also wanted to request all our devotees who are in Delhi or even outside, please do join the Deepam celebrations at Ramana Kendra on 19th, which is Friday in the evening at 5:15 p.m. A YouTube link has also been shared through email, SMS, and WhatsApp. In case you are not able to, or for any other reason, not in a position to be at Ramana Kendra Delhi, please do participate through the online route. Namo Ramana. Now I would request Narayanji to continue with the Aarti and Akshar Manamalai.
Arunachala Varatyetra Akshara Manamalai Shatra கருணாகர கணபதியே கரமருளி காப்பாய். அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சலம் என அகமே நினைப்பவர் அகந்தை வேறறுப்பார் அருணாச்சலா அழகு சுந்தரம் அகமுற்று அபிநமாயிருப்போம் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அகம்புகுந்தீத்தும் அககுகை சீரையாய் அமர்வித்ததென் கொல் அருணாச்சலா ஆறு காயனை ஆண்டனை அகற்றிடு அகிலம் பழித்திடும் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா இப்படி தப்புனையே நினைத்தால் இனி யார் விடுவார் அருணாச்சலா ஈடிடும் மண்ணையில் எரிதருள் துணிவோய் உனகருள் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா உனையே மாற்றி ஓடாதுள்ளத்தின் மேல் உறுதியாய் இருப்பாய் அருணாச்சலா ஊர் சுற்று ஊழம் விடாது உன்னை கண்டு அடங்கி அழகை காட்டருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா என்னை அழித்தி போது என்னை களவாவிடு இதுவோ ஆண்மை அருணாச்சலா தேவிந்த உறக்கம் என்னை பிறருக்க இது உனக்கழகோ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா ஐம்புல கல்வன் அகத்தினில் புகும்போது அகத்தில் நீ இல்லையோ அருணாச்சலா ஒருவன் முன்னை ஒளித்தவர் வருவார் சூதே இது அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா ஓங்காரம் பொருள் உயர்வில்லோ உனையார் அறிவார் அருணாச்சலா அவ்வை போல எனக்கு அருளை தந்து என ஆழ்வது உன் கடன் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சலம் வாழி அன்பர்களும் வாழி அக்ஷர மணமாலை வாழி வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே சூழ்க சுத்தாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே சூழ்க சுத்தாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே ஏழுலங்கள் ஜீவன் முக்தி இன்பம் பொங்கவே ஏழுலங்கள் ஜீவன் முக்தி இன்பம் பொங்கவே இதயமாகும் இறைவனாகி எல்லாம் ஓங்கவே இதயமாகும் இறைவனாகி எல்லாம் ஓங்கவே பாழ்மனம் மகந்தை வாழ்வு பாழ்பொழிதவே பாழ்மனம் மகந்தை வாழ்வு பாழ்பொழிதவே பரம சச்சிதானந்தாத்ம பால்பொழிதவே பரம சச்சிதானந்தாத்ம பால்பொழிதவே வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே சூழ்க சுத்தாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே தட்டிலாத நித்திய ஜீவம் தத்மமோங்கவே தட்டிலாத நித்திய ஜீவம் தத்மமோங்கவே தன்மயத்து சின்மயந்தழைத்து ஓங்கவே தன்மயத்து சின்மயந்தழைத்து ஓங்கவே எட்டு திக்குமம் சசோகம் எதிரொலிக்கவே எட்டு திக்குமம் சசோகம் எதிரொலிக்கவே எல்லாம் பிரம்மம் என்னும் உண்மை அறிவிக்கவே எல்லாம் பிரம்மம் என்னும் உண்மை அறிவிக்கவே வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே சூழ்க சுத்தாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே அம்சசோகம் அதுவே எல்லாம் அம்சசோகம் ஓம் பூர்புவஸ்வः தத்சவிதுர்வरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् देवसवितुर्वरेण्यं सत्यं तर्जेन प्रसन्नामि अमृतत्वं स्वाहा ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा ओम अपानाय स्वाहा ओम ज्ञानाय स्वाहा ओम उदानाय स्वाहा ओम समानाय स्वाहा ओम ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः कुलगंड इरुप्पुनिर्दियं समर्पयामि मध्ये विद्यमानियं समर्पयामि अमृतोपतासूत्रावसं समर्पयामि नीराजनं समर्पयामि नीराजनानन्तरम् आसमनीयं समर्पयामि ओम ओम भूगीबल समाहितं नागवल्ली तले उदं कर्पूर सोत संहितं कर्पूर नीराजनं नमर्षि समर्पयामि ओम नमो भगवते रमणाय नमः ओम नमो भगवते ओम नमो भगवते कार्तिकाय नमः ओम नमो भगवते मुरुगाय नमः ओम नमो भगवते वायुदेवाय नमः ओम नमो भगवते सूर्याय नमः ओम नमो भगवते स्वामिनारायणाय नमः ओम नमो भगवते दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः ओम नमो भगवते नटराजने नमः ओम नमो भगवते भैरवे नमः ओम नमो भगवते शिवाय नमः ओम नमो भगवते पार्वतीये नमः ओम नमः शिवाय नमः ओम नमः शिवाय नमः ओम नमः शिवाय नमः ओम शिवाय नमः ओम शिवाय नमः ओम शिवाय नमः जो राजा का साचो वा प्रोमेने देवे देवत्वा वेदानि नमस्ति भवति वेदावतो वै देवानां स्वाहा दैवात्मैवान् चैतन्यं दैवमन्तो मे राजाय देवराजादौनि जगद्गुरुवान् चन्द्रनाथं भगवान् नीराजनं रमणाय नमः यो वां पुष्पं वेद पुष्पवान् प्रजावान् पुष्पान् बोधि चन्द्रमा वां पुष्पं पुष्पवान् प्रजावान् पुष्पान् बोधि ओम तत् ब्रह्मा ओम तत् वायु ओम तत् आत्मा ओम तत् सत्यम ओम तत् सर्वम ओम तत् पुरो नमः ओम तत् शक्ति बोधे ते दुआया पुष्पमुक्तितु ओम तदागो ज्योतिर्गो कर्मणान प्रजयामने विद्यालयके अमृतत्वमानसु परेणनाहं नितं गुहायं विप्रादितेदियो विसक्ति वेदांत ज्ञान से नित्यदार्थ संन्यास योगाकर एवं तत्त्वा ते ब्रह्मलोके प्रकाश काले आरामतात् परिमुच्यन्ति सर्वे आरं विभावं परमे स्मृतं यत् पुण्डरीकपुरमस्य समुत्सदं तत्राविन्तग्रमं दिशोपत् तस्मिन् यदं तद्वादित्यं यो वेदान्तोऽसुरं लोकतो वेदान्तसत्य प्रतिष्ठितः तस्य प्रगतिलीनस्य परसमयस्वरः मन्त्रपुष्पं कमलमस्ति समर्पयामि ॐ तत्सत्तु मन्त्रपुष्पं समर्पयामि हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम ज्ञानि ज्ञानि स्वाहा ज्ञानि ज्ञानि प्रत्यक्ति अरुणाचल रमणाथ मुल्ला स्वामीनाथ ने दक्षिणामूर्ति नटराजरे भैरवरे नंदी वंशराज उपार ओम नमः शिवाय ओम नमः शिवाय ओम नमः शिवाय ओम शिवाय ओम शिवाय ओम शिवाय ओम नमः शिवाय ओम नमः शिवाय ओम नमः शिवाय अरुणाचल रमणाथ हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम
Namo Ramana. This brings us to the conclusion of today's satsang with Mr. Michael James. We shall reconvene with him same day, same time next month. And once again, all the devotees are welcome to join Deepam on Friday at 5:15 p.m. at Ramana Kendra, Delhi. Otherwise, you could also attend through YouTube. Namo Ramana.